Cool. So it looks like we have five talks lined up. So we're gonna start with Mayo's talk on RSpec and Capybara, getting like supercharging your TDD with these cool gems. Then Michaela will be up talking about SCSS, nested style sheets, using RubyMine. That's what Diane's going to talk about, which is a pretty cool IDE, which is like a replacement for Sublime Text. And then Dave can jump in and talk about his experience to like really ace the technical interview. And Tyler, who I don't know if he's here yet, if he comes, he can give a talk on TMUX. If he can't make it, maybe he'll have to give a talk later down the line. So I'll keep my eye
I know
out.
he said he was going to be here tonight, but if it doesn't, he's going to give a talk next Lightning Talks as well. So
cool, good stuff. So that's sort of the plan of attack. You guys can sort of see the more descriptive write-up in this Google Doc here. And yeah, let's get started.
all right, so starting out, we have Mayo, and he is going to give a talk on getting started with RSpec and Capybara.
Hey. Hi, everyone. So, can you hear me? Cool. So I'll just get started with the screen sharing. Okay, can you guys see it? So today, my name is Nyotan Cho. They call me Mayo, and today I'll be talking about RSpec. It's a TDD framework, and a little bit about feature testing with Capybara, and whatnot, all the other stuff involved with the behavioral driven development. So what exactly is RSpec? RSpec is a TDD framework, just like a Rails own test unit, and RSpec wants to put itself as one of the tools you use when you're doing BDD, behavioral driven development, which consists of TDD, domain driven design, acceptance test driven planning. So all those things are BDD, and RSpec is just one of the tools you can use to do TDD under BDD. And I summed it up like this: when you are doing RSpec, any kind of TDD, it's pretty much like there's some context given, and then when some event occurs, then I expect some outcome. So given some context, when some event occurs, then I expect some outcome, and that's pretty much like the whole thing about RSpec. And today I'm not gonna get into like pros and cons of Rails test unit versus RSpec and all those stuff. I'm just here to just inform people RSpec exists and how you can get things done with RSpec. But if you want to know about that, there's the creator of Rails, DHH. He doesn't really like RSpec. I put a few links here. He just wants to go simplistic and stuff. So yeah, you can check it out later in the slide. I'm gonna put it on the Lightning website. So this is the structure of RSpec. It's like I said before, given some context, when some event occurs, then I expect some outcome. So when you do like this, is the syntax goes like this: RSpec.describe, and this is a controller test. One of the controller tests that I put an example. Static pages controller, and that the type is controller, and then you describe it. So the first two describe are what are given, and then the syntax goes like this. It renders an index template. That is when something happened, and then what do? You expect a response to render template, and that is index. And yeah, so it's a very similar in a sense that like you just do pretty much the same steps as Rails mini test unit, but the syntax is a little different. That's one of the reasons a lot of people, some people don't like using RSpec, because they have to learn a whole different language somewhat to learn RSpec. So but if you break it down like this, it's not that complicated. It's just you describe stuff, and then it does something, and then you expect something. So the expect part is equivalent to assertion for test unit. So yeah, that's the baby. And let's so I'm gonna show how to use RSpec with just Ruby code first, and then we'll move on to Rails. So first of all, you're gonna do gem install RSpec on your terminal, and that should install RSpec. And and then you create a folder, and then when you put in RSpec dash init, it's gonna create a .rspec file and a spec helper file, and those are that's the setup for RSpec. So spec helper can actually should bring in the actual Ruby classes, like here require relative car, so it's going to bring in car.rb, and under spec helper I will switch screen and I will show Sublime Text, where you can see the whole thing better. Okay, Sublime Text.
So Maya, just so you know, all we can see now is your slides.
Yeah, can you see the Sublime Text now?
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So that's not the one yet. I have another one, a car spec. Okay. Okay, so this is the spec helper, and this is how it is set up. Under spec, there will be car spec. That's where all the tests are going to go. And there's a spec helper, and that is just bringing in car.rb. So this is a car, and this is the class that I created. It's a very basic class with accessors, make, model, type, and then like a method, honk, return this. And then this is how it gets tested here. So before anything is you set it up, the test, just like how you would do it with mini test. And then when you describe a new, this is a describe method, and then it takes 3 parameters. So you expect the car instance to be an instance of car. This is RSpec3 syntax, which is a lot similar to test unit than RSpec2. RSpec2 uses a lot of should. So like RSpec2, it would be like a car should be an instance of car. But RSpec3 gets like a lot, kind of, for me, coming from a test unit, RSpec3 is so much easier to pick up. And same thing with, like describe make do, it returns the correct make, and then expect car.make to equals make equal make. And the model is the same thing, and the type pretty much the same, describe it expect, and the honk describe it expect to pong pong. Yeah, it's just like that. So when you run RSpec, it's yeah, it's just you just put in. Can you guys see the terminal?
No, we can't.
Not yet.
Yeah. I got okay. So yeah, so the syntax is very simple. You just go into the folder and the RSpec spec/car underscore spec.rb, and then this is what happens. And then under here .rspec, that's where you can do a couple of things like color coding and require spec helper and format doc. If you take this out, it's just going to show ... So like this is it's just going to show like all the ... So this is what it does for. So if you do like this format doc, then it starts showing like this. So there's a few things you can do with RSpec, And let me go back to my slides. Uh, are the slides up?
Yeah, they are.
Okay, cool, man. I'm having a hard time with this Zoom. So yeah, that's pretty much the how it's done with Ruby code. So require spec helper, and then you describe something, and then this is the setup for this, and then you describe the method, and it returns the correct sound. That's just you put in the quotation mark. You just describe yourself, whatever you want to test, and you expect the uh, instances method to equal something, and then this is how how you do it. A format documentation that I wrote, I typed out. You can do it like this -fd. That's how it's done one way. And there are some other RSpec measures that it's pretty common. So it's expect something to equals, expect something to match the regular expression, like / something dot. This is to regular expression matching, and then to be true boolean, and then to match the array, and then to start with a or to start with something and to end with something. You can also do like to start with something and end with something, and the to equals this or this or this. It's just a few of those. And there's a cheat sheet that you can look at. Mm, yeah, and I'll put it on the Lightning Talk website as well. It's a very popular, I mean, very useful one. So if you're trying to get used to RSpec, then even this like couple pages can actually teach you a lot of stuff. So all right, let me get back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so let's get started with how to use RSpec with Rails. I set up the gem file. I just copy pasted it. You don't have to really do it this way, but it kind of helps like a few stuff, especially like guard and a Selenium WebDriver. If you're gonna use Capybara with it, and I'll show you in a bit how to do that. It's this is the development and test, and then you put RSpec Rails factory girl, and then for the test you put Faker, Capybara, guard, Selenium WebDriver. That's how the gem file is set up, and then bundle install, and then next step is you just do Rails generate RSpec install. That should install like all the stuff for it. If you try to install RSpec in the middle of a project, you're gonna have to like generate the spec file for all the controllers and models. So like it's pretty simple too. Just Rails generate RSpec controller, static pages controller. That's the controller name. You just and then model is the same thing. That should generate the spec files for controller and model. If you are gonna, after you installed RSpec, and if you run it Rails generate controller model, that should generate them automatically, all the spec files. And for Capybara, you're gonna need to go to spec Rails helper, and then put this in so that you can use Capybara with it. Capybara is basically feature testing. So like you can actually like go to different pages, click on different stuff, and make sure things work the way you expect them to work. Okay, and now we're gonna get into control the test. So this is so that like we can get familiarized with all the syntax and stuff. So you can go to RSpec documentation, and they show you pretty good ones as well. This is RSpec.describe. This is the latest RSpec 3.3 syntax. It changes a little bit. It doesn't use any more of that should anymore, and it uses like this RSpec.describe static pages controller, and the type is controller, and then describe get index. It renders the index template. You get the index. You expect the response to render template index. So it's something like you like reading English. It's that's probably one of the reasons a lot of people use RSpec in the industry. And I picked up RSpec after I started going out looking for a job, and a lot of people just use RSpec. Put RSpec a lot, and so okay, it's about time. This is a good starting point to learn all those things. So it's not that hard from my experience. It's just you just gotta like be able to relate your test unit skills to RSpec. And this is getting the about page. It's very simple, just like that. Describe, get about. You can put anything you want inside these quotes, so that like just to explain yourself. It renders the about page, and then you get the about, and you expect the response to render template. So let me move to my terminal and run this test live. So the controller test, I believe it was this one, yeah. So RSpec spec controllers static. So this is going to be the command line interface, and yeah. So this is how you test it. You can go into like specific test, just like a test unit. Nothing different here. So yep, it renders the index page and renders the about page. So this is very simple controller test. And then we'll move on with our test model test. It's almost the same. It's like RSpec.describe the model name, and the type is going to be the model this time. So you describe. I tried to build this app called with the model selfie. Yeah, and Rails just pretty much automatically created a model selfie with Y when I tried to create selfies. So this is how it ended up being. But anyway, selfie, I just created a factory, and I just built the factory selfie, and then I want the type. I'm just checking if the title is valid. So selfie.title 2 equals this is the title I put in my factory. And same thing with description. Selfie.description 2 equals this is and this is the the description that I put it in my factory. So the test is yeah, I just ran those tests like about maybe half an hour ago, so everything should pass. So RSpec spec models. Okay. Models selfie spec. So it should run. It should pass to, yeah. So it has a valid factory title, valid factory description. So this is model. Yeah. So this is the code that I was explaining in the slide. So I'm gonna go back there. This is a model test, very similar to controller test, just different stuff.
Good stuff, Maya. Well, it's been 10 minutes. It's a super good, fascinating talk, and I think everybody learned a lot about RSpec and testing in general. But why don't we open it up to questions from the audience now to see if people want to sort of have any specific questions to ask you about this stuff. So does anybody have any questions for Maya?
What was the biggest hurdle that you ran into starting out with RSpec?
I would say it's just getting the syntax because RSpec 2 was very popular, very popular. So when I was trying to get into like RSpec, I was like, okay, I'm gonna just learn the latest version of it. And when you go check the like tutorials and stuff, a lot of them use should and should not and all those. So I just wanted to get the syntax right. That's why it took me quite a while to like get these slides ready because I actually like pretty much created my own tutorial.
That's kind of the same thing that I've been running into too, is you look and try and find, examples of how to do something, and then you see conflicting examples because one's in RSpec 2 and one's in 3. So
yeah.
So you were super politically correct, Maya, when you sort of said you weren't gonna do any like comparison to test unit, and like I liked the sort of the way you pulled that off. I'm going to ask you to, so I'm going to push you in that position.
Oh man,
that was on my list of questions too, actually.
What do you think? So I'm a test unit guy, but what's your thought comparing and contrasting them?
Okay, let me put it this way. It's if you want to like just like, simple like test, like without any sugar, without any like superhuman readable, then test units is just fine. But RSpec, on the other hand, it's a lot more human readable, and it adds a few features like like I just found like color and format documentation. Those are really good ones. But I'm sure there are a few, because I was talking to my mentor and he was like all RSpec guy. So he said there are a lot of features that test unit doesn't have, but I haven't found any yet at my level, except for like a couple of those. So if you want a lot of features with it, then go with it. RSpec, it's a great test framework you can learn with you, even transferring your skills from test unit to RSpec. It's just a matter of like, I mean, for me, it took me literally 2 hours, and then like boom, that's it. Like it clicked, and all right, it's the same thing. It's just like you set up the test, you run it, and like even factory go, the setup is like you can do the same setup for RSpec. So it's like it's either you want to go simple and like, or you want to like get add stuff to it, and another thing is it's very popular amongst web development community, Rails development community. So when I was like looking for jobs, that's what got me started getting into RSpec, like RSpec, and so I'm like, okay, I need to get into this, and like just like it can't be that hard. Come on, like we've tackled the entire monster of Rails. So this shouldn't be that bad, and it's not bad at all. It's easy.
Good stuff.
And Ken, just if you give me like maybe 30 seconds, can I show this feature test?
Sure.
Very quick. It's because it's like it uses JavaScript and stuff. It's with the Selenium browser. So let me go to my here. And then so I'm gonna just like spec features. This is a feature testing. I'm gonna put it on the slide so you guys can look at it later. So features, user visits homepage. User visits homepage. So when I run this, what happens is it's gonna bring up the web browser and make sure that a user actually visits the homepage and successfully. So it fires up Firefox.
We can only see your terminal right now, Maya.
Yeah, I mean, with Zoom, it's a little hard to share, but I'll try that again. Okay.
So basically what you're seeing right now is Firefox gets started up and goes to
homepage.
Gotcha. And then you see a test passing. Okay.
And then you see the test passing. That's pretty much it. But yeah, I'll share that in the slides. Try it out. Very cool feature, and you will be amazed at it. Yeah. It's using Capybara and Selenium WebKit.
Okay, enough plugging. Ken's getting nervous, I can tell.
Cool.
Good stuff. Cool. Well, all right.
Nice talk, Mayo.
Thank you.
Yeah, very helpful. I think you're right as far as like the web development community too. That was, well, I kind of got thrusted into it, but before I started this new job, I started working on it, and that was the same exact reason why every job description I saw, everybody I talked to was always saying RSpec. So it's a necessary evil. Sorry, Ken.
I don't think it really matters. I think you pick one and you just use it, and like picking up another one isn't that hard after the fact. It's learning how to test your code and how to think about like breaking code into testable units. That's the real hard part. The syntax, I don't think, is really what like trips people up too much. But cool, let's keep going. I think Michaela's up next.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my talk? Okay, can everybody see my
Yeah,
screen?
we can see it.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right, so I wanted to do a talk on efficient styling with SCSS and Sass. So to get started, what is SCSS? I think is important. It's basically just a helpful way to keep your CSS organized and dry. And it's actually a gem that was originally written in Ruby, and now it comes in a whole bunch of different languages. But because it was written in Ruby, it kind of has a lot, it has like a couple of really helpful things in common with Ruby, and you can definitely tell that it was written by Ruby developers. But it's basically just shorthand CSS. It's an extension language, and it's different from Sass. So Sass is the original, and then SCSS kind of came off of that and is actually now more commonly used. So when people are talking about Sass these days, they're usually really talking about SCSS. But we're going to go over that. So one of the first things to know about SCSS is that you can build variables in it, just like Ruby, and you can define them both locally and globally. And you just build them by adding a $sign to something. So you can define like your font stack or your primary color. And this is really helpful because then when you're referencing it later on throughout your style guide, you only have to change it once. So you stay like really consistent with your designs. And then when your CSS gets compiled, it gets processed into just regular CSS. So like this is what's getting served up. And then you can do mix-ins, which are a little more complicated, and they can take, you can pass them a variable, and you can also do like multiple lines of editing at the same time. So like this box element, you want to change its border radius to be 10 pixels, but say that you're just testing it out and you want to change it to like 9 pixels or 8. You don't want to have to write that like every single time. And so you just you build a mixin called border radius, you include it, and then you pass the 10 pixels through as the variable and it changes it for you. You can also build partials, which are really simple, but like super helpful, especially if you're on a team or if your CSS starts to get really long. So what that allows you to do is just take a chunk of your CSS and put it into a different style sheet. And then as long as you put a leading underscore at the beginning of the name of your style sheet with the extension, like all of these files have the extension of .scss, you can edit that code and then you just import it into like your master or your main or like one CSS file. And what that does is that instead of like pulling up an HTTP request every single time that you're loading a style sheet, so like one for your main, one for your footer, one for your nav if you have them all separated, it'll compile them all together. And so it like saves you time and it's just serving it all up in one CSS file together, but then you don't have to look at a really long file. You can also do nesting, which is awesome. So similar to like HTML, where you can nest a div inside of another div and then like a UL and then LI. Instead of writing out like column left UL, column left LI, column left A, and probably giving column left its own like parameters as well, you can just put the parent element and then nest your UL and even nest your LI within those. And then your A is nested inside of your column left as well. And that really helps you, like, in case you change the name of this, or in case you change some of the parameters around this and you like need to understand how they're related, then it's all right in one place and it's really easy to keep everything together and like organized. But you should be aware that you don't want to nest too deeply, because when your SCSS gets compiled, this will come out as column left, UL, LI, and you can end up making that name like really long. And what it does is it just makes it super specific. And so it's hard to reuse throughout like the rest of your code. So while it's kind of like a fine line to walk of like making it really easy and really quick, but also getting lazy and like actually writing more code than you really need to. The same can be done for extend. So extend is basically the same thing as nesting, but you're pulling from something that isn't a parent element. So you're just pulling from another element somewhere in your code. And so the example that they give is messages. So like all of our messages, success, error, and warning have the same, want to have the same parameters as message, except you want to change the border color. And so when you just extend message, you're pulling in the padding, the color, and the 1 pixel solid border, and then just changing its color. A good thing about this is that without doing an extend, a lot of the times, like I know you can forget that you've already written like a lot of this code, and then you end up just repeating it throughout your style sheet. So this is a great way to like not have to repeat yourself, but you should again be aware that if a lot of elements are really sharing the same, like same calls, then maybe you should get an overarching class that they should all share. So you have all those those are kind of like the basics. But then, like I said, like it was built with, by like Ruby guys. And so there's some really cool like functions built into it and operators. So there's some like for colors. So you can pass a variable of a color that you might already have, and then an amount in, and you can desaturate that color. Or like if you want to show a button that you can't click at the moment, you could just pass its color in and then turn it into grayscale. And that's the same as desaturating at 100%. You can do numbers, so you can do like operations of adding and subtracting, but you can also round up or round down. And then you can do control directives too. So you can do if statements, which are really helpful for like debugging. So you could say like if debug, then highlight in red, and then you don't even have to inspect element when something's broken. And you can also define your own functions, which is great. So you could do make greener and then pass the value in, and it'll identify the hex code of whatever variable you're passing through and add 50 green to it and then make that color greener. So like here we're using it for a background color, and we're taking the hex code of gray, adding 50 to it, and then we're pushing out this new hex code. So here are the like the docs and the references. And then I just wanted to show this site too really quick, because I think like once you start thinking about like making your style guides a little more efficient, like this is really helpful too. So this is called CSS Stats, and you can pass any website into this. So we'll do Twitter. And it'll basically parse your CSS and then deliver you all of the information about it. So like all of your rules, all your declarations, how many unique colors you have in it, how many background colors, font sizes, and even like how specific you have. So what I was saying with like nesting, if there's like moments for where you can improve inside of your code, you'll see that here with like where things get super, super specific. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Holy smokes. That was awesome.
So I have, I guess, 2 questions. The first one is, are there any like more, like you talked about how you can sort of define custom functions and such in SCSS. Are there any gems that just have like built-in ones that sort of like we should know about?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure, like built-in functions.
Like basically like they generated a whole bunch of functions that like the make greener function and just all sorts of other functions, kind of like just useful utility stuff.
So let's go, actually, I'm going to go to like the functions that are built. Can you still see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So like this is the functions that they have built in. And you can see, like I only included a couple of them, but so it can tell you, it can create a color from, like when you're doing RGB and then adding the color values, that's a function. So there's some like really basic stuff that you might use all the time. Like I've used, there's one on strings that does to uppercase, and that converts your string into an uppercase. So if you decide that you want the style on your button to be that your, like the word should be an uppercase, you can do that. Or to lowercase, which like, again, like we use in Ruby, and like you never really think about doing it in CSS or like SCSS, but it's there. You can do like percentages, rounding, ceiling, floor, absolute value. I saw an example earlier today where like if you actually go to the SAS, like SAS's page, they'll show you that you can if you want it. So like one good thing to do is like if you decide, if you're not using Bootstrap and you want to decide where your minimum width is for a device, you can set that to a function and then do math to say like, okay, I want this to take up like 2/3 of the page, no matter how like, if the we're at the minimum width. When you're setting, like if something is a touch screen, that's a function that you're setting. There's just so many. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so I guess there's just a ton built in that sort of like that.
Yeah, that like you don't even
offer.
think about. It's crazy.
That's
It's like
awesome.
amazing. Yeah.
When you, is there a performance hit, like running, say, using upcase? So if we do a bunch of work and, you know, titles on our Firehose Lightning app, we want all upcase. I don't feel like going in and actually changing all that code.
Mm-hmm.
Is it quicker to do it with this way, or are we going to have any performance hits or anything like that, you know of?
So it's basically like you should be aware of like what it's going to compile to, like what I was saying with nesting, like it's going to compile to like the parent element ul li if you nest it as the parent element ul and then you nest the li inside of the ul. If you nest it as the parent element and then li, you're saying that like anytime there's an li inside of that parent element, it'll have these properties. So if you have like a list that you want to be really specific and maybe you gave the ul a class name, like that's where you hit into like, is this a really specific element? But if it's just going to compile out anyways into like the parent element ul li, it's kind of the same. One thing I did notice though is like I put in my website on here and my stats are like much higher than sometimes it doesn't work. My stats are like much higher than they should be. And so I think what's happening is that it's also like parsing Bootstrap. So if you have Bootstrap loaded, but you're not referencing like even if you're not using all of the CSS that comes along with Bootstrap, that's still loaded onto your site. Oh, I can't get it to work. But it'll still count all that. So you should be aware of like, it's more about like being aware of when you're loading a framework onto your site and that all of that CSS is still kind of getting loaded, even if it's not necessarily getting called. So it's just kind of like sitting there on your code base, like lazily. But you might end up using some of that stuff. So it's like, do you want to delete it? Or do you want to, like, what should you do? Should you like comment it out?
Yeah, that's definitely good to know at least.
So what advice do you have about like refactoring just like very bad CSS? Do you suggest sort of going after like taking all of the features that you sort of talked about and doing it all at once? Or how would, if you were to jump in into like this just mess of CSS,
yeah,
what would your tactics be?
So I had to do that actually like recently for work. And I think I would start with partials just because that allows you to kind of say, like it just allows you to tackle chunks of the code into different style sheets. So for me, like I would want to be able to organize it into like, today I'm going to tackle just the footer code, and then tomorrow I'm going to tackle like things that I know go on like, this screen, or like the about page or whatever. Because that doesn't have any effect on like what the user sees or like time. Like it all it does is it's only seen by you. And then you can go in and I think like manageably try and edit, like try and add some variables. So then you're being consistent, because that's like what variables are for, right? Is to make sure that you don't have 14 different like blues for like if you decide that you want a blue in your text, or that you don't have like 12 different background colors or button types. And so start just like trying to decide, and also using like a site like your stats and seeing what you have the most of, and going through and searching into, I would search like for where you're using those colors, or like those textiles or whatever, and see if you can switch it to something else and kind of like start to make everything aligned.
Cool, good stuff. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I have lots of questions, but they're all just specific to me. So I'll send her,
Yeah, you can.
I need refactoring help, and Ken's not the best at refactoring CSS. So
just Slack me. Always on.
Cool.
No, that was pretty awesome just to see nesting stuff. Nesting is something that I always run into issues with. I always want to use it. I always see somebody using it, but for some reason it never renders properly in my app. So
I think one of the most, so I didn't put it in here, but I think the biggest thing about nesting or just CSS in general is like when something's not working, check that it doesn't have code, like it doesn't have styles working on it from a parent element. Because that's like, that is always the thing. That's like restarting your server. It's like always the problem, right?
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, super good talk.
Yeah, super fascinating. It makes me want to refactor a lot of the CSS stuff I've been doing today. So it kind of good timing for the talk, I guess.
Hey, inspiring Ken. That's what we all strive for.
Cool. So next up we have Diane, who's going to talk about RubyMind. So Diane, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I do, just to let everybody know that wasn't on to begin with, I do have, can you hear me? Ken, you're messing with your earphones. Okay. I have a puppy, a 10-week-old puppy, so she's making a lot of noise out there if you hear anything else. And I have never given a tech talk before. I've given other ones, and to have to follow Michaela, who just did a great job, and Mayo, a little bit nervous, but anyway, just bear with me. And I'm doing some stuff live on here too, so let me know if the screenshots don't render correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so let me pull up the correct one. Here we go. All right. This is the presentation, and basically I just did kind of a RubyMind versus the Sublime text, since we all work with Sublime, and wanted to talk about the differences and the benefits of using an IDE or a text editor. And it doesn't like me here. So the text editor is basically for Sublime Text. It's a text editor, and you use one screen, and you have to, I will show you. When I do Ken's, this is what I do a lot. I bring up my Sublime, I bring up my Firehose project, which isn't going to let me do this here, so that I can go into my resources and learn about the ATTR reader that Ken does. So I have my video going here, I have my Sublime Text here, and I have to pull up my terminal here in the corner. And if you don't have a very large screen, this can get pretty, you have to go back and forth a couple times and trying to make sure that I see everything that Ken has on his screen down here. And he also has the split screen going on. So, it made me think that maybe there was something else out there. So my husband actually got me RubyMine so that I could see what it was like. And I, wasn't sure what it would do and how it would fit in with what we were doing. So there's a couple things about RubyMine. It is a little bit more expensive than the Sublime Text, especially since all you have to do about every 15 times that you use it is click cancel. You don't want to buy. So that makes it really nice. But they do have, different pricings for different people. It's $99 a year for one license, $199 for a commercial, which gives you unlimited. Startups get a 50% discount on licenses, and students, educators, and open sources can actually get RubyMine for free. So if you're willing to tell them about your project, or if you still have a .edu address, you can actually get RubyMine for $0. And $0 is, makes a lot of difference. The anatomy of an IDE versus the text editor is that you have a console and a text editor and a debugger all in one screen. And I will show you the screens here in a second. Couple advantages that RubyMine is, it deals, and I'm just going to run through these really quick so that I can actually show you live what RubyMine is. It supports Puppet. It supports chef integration. So if you're looking to, add some cookbooks to your project or recipes or whatever else you need, it's really easy to integrate with the RubyMine. It also does, it checks for the Ruby version that you're using. And if you're using different versions, you can see on this screen, it shows you. So, sometimes, a couple of the times we've gotten into trouble, I have, with pushing up to Heroku or something because my version wasn't the same that we needed. You can actually change for any of the, for JavaScript or for Ruby or for whatever, you can change whichever version you need to really simply instead of having to go in. So it's a really easy way to debug what you're trying to do. And more benefits. Inline variables view, you can actually right click in here and see where the variables are, how many times you've used it, where else it is. Not just when you click on it in Sublime, you can actually see it on the screen. I've watched Ken do it, and you click on card and card highlights everywhere. Well, this actually will show you every instance that you have throughout your entire program, throughout your entire script, and whether or not they have been, your code has been finished, or whether you still have an open parent or open, line somewhere, you didn't close a div, you didn't do something else. So it helps, it keeps you, in line. The debugger console is also right within the IDE. So instead of having to go in and, in addition to having all the screens open, right click on Chrome and do inspect the element and see what's in there, you can actually inspect everything right here in RubyMine. It makes it really, really simple, and it saves a lot of time. And I know it's just, 4 or 5 seconds at a time, but 4 or 5 seconds at a time, when you start doing more and more coding and you're making, $50 to $65 an hour, it starts to add up. So you save in $25 a year, you're looking at a couple $1,000s. And, it makes it easier. And if you don't have to go back and forth and you know that your tool is all in one area, it's very simple. I do understand why we start with Sublime Text for Firehose project. Ken and Marco want to make sure, and you guys can both correct me if I'm wrong, want to make sure that we actually understand how to test, how to debug, how, to make sure that we close our divs and that we close any of the attributes that we have out there. If you start off using an IDE, it automatically does it for you. And while it's really great, you don't understand always why it happens, or that you can go ahead and do, a caret, a side caret, and BR, so that you can close your brakes without having to do a second brake. That doesn't automatically do that, and why you can do that, and why you have to line up. It also makes it very simple when you're trying to figure out where the problem is. It shows up on the screen. And when I get to it, I'll show you, there's little places that show you all the errors that are on there. You can actually refactor on the IDE by moving an entire class. You can move it from within one portion of your script to its own file. You can move it to another entire script if you'd like to. So it makes it very easy not to just, if you realize that your code is now, over 100 lines long on one page, and you're like, oh no, it's not supposed to be over 100. I need to move. I have too many classes here. It's very easy to pull that class out, and it pulls out every attribute with that class and lets you know if there are going to be any issues when you pull that class out of your page. So it makes it really simple. Scratch files. You can put, and I love to do scratch files, and I actually do them on a piece of paper where I see what's going on. You can use the scratch file right in your in the IDE and figure out. It's basically it helps with testing. That's what I use it for. So you can make sure that something works before you actually put it in your file. It also uses editor config, and it makes sure that if you pull in JavaScript or pull in something from Coffee or something from any of the other, a YAML file or whatever, that it's configured exactly how it was configured in your original file, that it doesn't pull it in and move it to whatever defaults you have set up in your, like for Ruby with a 2-tab. It does not do that as long as that's what you put in there for it to do, if that makes any sense. And then we'll get onto the back. This is a distraction-free mode, so it actually makes it nice. You can get rid of the command line, the toolbars, and everything else that's on there, and just have the code on there so you can see what's going on if you don't want to have any of the other things that are going on. Once again, it helps with the Coffee script. It makes it very easy to do your style sheets. Very fast JavaScript, because this is one of the places where it kind of cheats and helps you develop the JavaScript without having to add all the, it puts in the semicolon for you. It makes sure that, I know when we did Nomster that, sometimes we did we had a photo and a picture, and those were, if you had in one place photo and one place picture, your program didn't run when we were doing, I can't remember what the controller was that we were doing. But this would actually make sure that you didn't have those kind of errors on there. Emmet is just, is that my little bell to me and I'm done?
No, you got 3 minutes left.
Okay. All right, let me get to the, there's enhancements for CSS, but let me actually get to the RubyMine itself. So, RubyMine. I'm just going to go ahead and open up one of the projects that we already have. This is my test game that I'm working on. Now you can see, I'll move this down here. You can see that this is telling me that the database connection properties are not there. So I can look and make sure what happened to the database properties. Unfortunately, I switched computers on here because my other one was not working with my headphones. So I don't have it pulled up in my Vagrant environment, but that's the reason why the database is showing. It also tells you if you're missing any gems that you still need to run your program. So that makes it really nice because, Sublime does not do that. Also, there are numerous ways for you to customize what you can do with RubyMine. If you look down here, I don't know if you guys can see this in the bottom right-hand corner. This also tells you how your line separators go, which branch you're on. When you first set up RubyMine, you set it to go to your GitHub account. So it automatically pushes and pulls from GitHub, so you don't have to go out and use your terminal, and it goes through Vagrant, so you can make it work with the Firehose project. It was much easier to not use it because Ken using Sublime Text just made it better. But going forward, I'll probably be using RubyMine because it shows all the branches that are on here, so you're not trying to see, oh, well, Dave, this is for our group project, so one of the other people has an STI branch, and I won't make the mistake of trying to pull in the wrong branch or make the mistakes on that end. There also, here in the project part, it tells you, I don't know if you can see this, but this says under the JavaScript that this is a JS file. Next to application.js. Each one of these shows you, like this says Sass on here. These are Ruby files. So you can see these are HTML files. So you know what type of, instead of just, obviously you can look at the name of the file to see that too. But if you look just at that, it's a really easy way to figure out, what type of file it is and how it should fit in with the rest of your program. There are, let me pull one up here. You can, on each one of the words in each file, you can look and see how many times it was used. You can look at the history. This will be the history of what I've done just on this today. So you don't actually need to it has a running, what am I trying to say? A running comment of everything that you've done. So if I made more changes in here and I didn't commit it to Git yet, but it was running when I first started and now it's not, I can actually go through here and figure out exactly what was done at any point during my programming, which makes it really, really nice, because I know that I've done it a couple times where I've actually restarted what we were supposed to be doing, and Ken can attest to this. I spent hours trying to pull in images on one of our projects that we were supposed to do, and if I would have had this in front of me, I could have seen where I had gone wrong because I forgot to do some committing to Git. This makes it very easy. You don't have to go back and forth. Everything is right in front of you. And I know myself that saving time, that's probably the biggest advantage of using an IDE over just using a text editor. Now, for Sublime, you can use it for Ruby, Perl, C#. You can use it for basically any programming language. RubyMine is obviously written for Ruby and Rails only. Now, like I said, you can do the JavaScript, you can do YAML, you can do Sass, you can do everything within inside that, but you can't use RubyMine to do a Python script, for example. Now, the company that does RubyMine does have a whole set of IDEs for all of those other things, but the one thing nice about using Sublime Text is that you already know it. So, like, after I finish Ruby, I've already started trying to work on some Python stuff just to see, how well I can do that. And it's much easier to use Sublime Text because I already know how it works. I already know where to go to find the stuff. I already know what I need to do. RubyMine takes a little bit of work to get started on it, but once you start moving into it, you can see that it makes it really, really nice to do. It's really easy to pull up a new project, to go in here and see what's going on. You can, you can debug, you can do all of those things. I could probably spend, if you didn't mind listening to me talk over myself, I could spend hours telling someone and showing someone how to use this, and there aren't very many good places. I mean, they have you can go to the tip of the day Anytime you sign in, they have a help here, and they have tips of the day you can go through every time. They also have tutorials and stuff that you can use. It's all online, and I started to go into this, but after having to do a couple of hours of listening to Ken work on JavaScript, I didn't really want to learn how to do RubyMine with all this stuff. But there is a lot of information out there, but it doesn't seem to be as user friendly as having Ken in front of in front of you on the TV. But anyway, if you have any questions, I have been, although it doesn't look like it, I have been using it for a while. It is really nice, and it makes it, because it works with Vagrant, because it works within all of the programs that we use, it does make it really nice to try and go back and say, okay, how would this have helped me when we were creating Flickster? It took me this long, and how long would it have taken me to do this? And even though I'm better at it now, it does save time. And being able to see your mistakes right in front of you, having it say, maybe you spelled that one wrong because you had class card here and class cardy here because you added an extra E. Anyway, I'm done, Ken. So
good stuff. So does anybody have any questions? I'm sure there's a bunch of questions that everybody
Colin is not allowed questions.
And just to sort of repeat sort of what you said, if you invest time in like infrastructure, so like basically the tooling and the stuff that you use, it's something that pays off in the long term. There's different tools that you can use. Sublime is probably the simplest to get started with, like you said, but there's all sorts of different tools. There's the IDE route you can go, which is like RubyMine, which is really great. And there's like the other route you can go, which is the Vim route. But both of them take some learning to do, but it works. I guess, have you used it ever to jump into certain gem files? Because I found that's kind of a neat feature too. So I don't know, do you have any experience doing that?
I have not done that yet. Between trying to do my project and all the coding challenges, I have not, been able to. I know that there's a lot of things out there that I haven't used. And, I was just excited that I was able to make it mine without having to, like we had to, for Sublime Text, you can actually make it so that it does the indent 2 spaces, but you have to go deep into the code to try and figure out a way to do that. So, I haven't done it yet, but I will now. As soon as we get off this, I'm going to have to go do that tonight.
What's your favorite feature of it?
Being able to see everything, being able to debug and have the console just have everything right there. So when I went back and did the card, created the card to help me think about how to do the chess app for the object-oriented programming, it was really nice to be able to not have to go into 3 different areas. And it is really, it's nice, but it is really hard to have terminal up, to have the root Sublime Text up, and have the videos up, trying to go through and make sure that, I've typed over your face and over your stuff a couple of times, and, the computer beeps at me. So I think that's the best thing, is that just to have it all right there and to be able to debug right in front of you without having to search. And, I do have to say, I don't like the fact that sometimes it's telling you to debug something that you're adding stuff to later, and there's sometimes where it does a stop on you and you have to, override the stop. But I figure the better I get at programming, the less that will happen probably.
Cool, good stuff. Does anybody else have any other questions?
All good.
I just have one question. Can you integrate it with like a team so that like where you were looking at the history, you could do like git blame?
Yes,
Right.
you can have more than one. You can have, as many people, as long as they have RubyMine.
Cool.
That's the only downside, but as long as they have it, then yeah, you can use it for a team.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool, good stuff. Cool, so next up we got Dave to talk about Stop Sweating the Interview with Ease. An excellent talk.
My title. All right, let's see if we can get this to work here. All right. Well, I'm getting this thing started here. Actually, yeah, my new job, I've been using Visual Studio. I think I told Ken that before. Yeah, Studio 2015. It's an IDE. It's pretty helpful in general. So, all right. Can everybody see that? Hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So, like many fire hosers, the bulk of my professional experience is not in web development. I have had jobs in retail, sales, recruiting, warehouse management, and I've also owned my own business before. I'm also a big urban gardener. So as a lifelong learner, I think it's easier to learn things if you apply new ideas and concepts to some sort of a framework. I'm going to use some basic gardening concepts because I'm comfortable with that to illustrate a few things about interviewing. So what do I know about interviewing? Quite a bit, actually. In addition to my own hiring of employees as an entrepreneur, these are some stats from when I was an internal recruiting manager, which kind of blew my mind, actually, when I thought about it and counted the things up. But it's also, since this is less of a technical talk and more, whoops, too far. Nope. Less of a technical talk and more of a subject-based topic. Here's kind of an overview. My hope is that you take away 1 to 2 nuggets that you can implement immediately the next time you actually have an interview. Just as a precursor here, I think I mentioned that before, I'm not going to cover like the technical part of it, as in like, solving whiteboarding problems. My goal is to simply help you prep for it, be less nervous, kind of overcome the fear part so that you can then get things started where you feel comfortable, and then your fire hose training and you're working with your mentor, your actual knowledge base, that'll take care of the rest. So it's more on the soft skills and the people side of things. So as far as when you think about it, interviews really are an absurd situation. I think we willingly submit ourselves to a borderline offensive and invasive questioning that wouldn't be socially acceptable in any other situation. It's also most often with people that we barely know. So here are some of the trends that I saw in the answers to the survey I posted of what people feel like they need the most help with in regards to interviewing. So for starters, if you want a halfway decent garden, you need to plan out which plants you want to grow and where they should be planted. For an interview, I think you also need to have a plan. For example, some things I know about myself. Number one, I'm not an aggressive or intimidating person by nature. I can be perceived as kind of a pushover or not very outgoing sometimes. I also know that I go off on tangents, make weird comments when I'm nervous or filling space. I like to think out loud if I don't know how to answer something, which is great if you're doing technical problems or solving for those types of questions. But otherwise, it looks kind of like I'm stalling. So for the latest interview, I had my nonverbals do a lot of the work for me. The dress code was professional, so number one, I showed up in a suit and tie, so that helped a lot. I printed a copy of my resume. I typed out 2 pages of questions that I was going to ask if I were interviewing myself, like if I was on the other side of the table, that included examples based upon my experience, notes from the phone interview that I had, and questions that I had wanted to ask at the end. So at the beginning of the interview, I told the interviewer I had the director of developers and then a team lead present on the other side of the table. So I told them I had kind of organized my thoughts a bit, laid out my papers on my side of the table. Of course, they had no problem with that. I mean, nobody's going to tell you, no, you can't have some form of notes in front of you if it's for like examples and things. So It showed that I am well organized, place a lot of value upon details, and portraying myself very well. So just like having or tying a tomato plant to a trellis or a rope, you can guide the direction of an interview based upon your questions. I think you should absolutely go on offense. You will always be given an opportunity to ask questions, usually several times throughout the interview. The format of any interview naturally allows for questions at regular intervals, regardless of how the interviewer sets it up. So I had written down kind of 3 categories of things. Must-haves in a job, can't stand things, and nice-to-haves ahead of time, and that allowed me to come up with some very pertinent questions. Things like, well, what do you like about the company culture? If hired, what are current company goals that I would be contributing to? What's your onboarding process? That was pretty big for me. Strengths of the company, and more importantly, honestly, what are areas of improvement that the company has right now? Also, what is a typical day like for one of your developers? So I would say, make no mistake, part of the job of the interviewer or recruiting manager on the other side of the table is to absolutely sell you on why their company is number one. If you give them your must-haves or needs for a job, they will definitely take the opportunity to sell you on it. So that's important because from my own experience, when you're the interviewer, and you switch over to like selling mode, then you start to envision the candidate as part of the team in order to sell things, to sell effectively. So they start putting you in the role already, which of course increases your chances of getting the job. So this last part here, I wanted to share 3 things that stuck in my mind from all the interviews and candidates over the years. Number 1, you may have heard of always be coding. Well, this is always be closing, to coin a sales phrase, soft closing, that is. An interview is a sale on both sides of the table. You are selling yourself, and they are selling the position and their company or team. So in your next interview or phone interview or any interaction that's a process, literally say, what is the next step? It's a clear signal that your questions have been answered. It's a tactful and complex way that you are both interested in the position. You understand you are in a process, and you value their time. So not only do I grow a variety of plants, but it's important to me that most of them are heirlooms. Heirlooms, I think, are authentic, unique, and interesting. Sometimes misshapen, strange, and curious, not unlike myself. So weave your experience and examples into your answers naturally. For instance, you have learned a ton about me personally in this short amount of time already for this lightning talk. Number 1, I'm organized. I have a sense of humor. I have enough confidence and tact to take calculated risks. I love gardening. You've already seen most of what my backyard looks like, and you know about my background and experience without even having to read my resume. So I think you should do the same in an interview when you build rapport throughout. The last piece of advice would be to refactor your answers ahead of time as much as possible. If interested, they'll definitely peel back a layer and ask follow-up questions. So start with a quick 1 to 2 sentence answer that hits your main points. Your experience from Firehose, your best experience example from Firehose is the group chess app if you're applying for a developer position on a team. So a bad example of how to explain the experience when asked would be, I worked on a chess app that was awesome. I built many features of the app, spent a lot of time communicating with my team. We used continuous integration in GitHub. I had to refactor several of my tests and pair programmed every chance that I got. Part of the struggle working with my team was having to work around different time zones and working remotely. The project took about 6 weeks. We followed the Scrum and Agile process. And my biggest takeaway was how to read and contribute to code that I didn't write originally. So that stream of consciousness approach is near impossible to follow or make sense of. A better way to explain that would be I worked on a remote team of 5 developers to build a web-based chess application that enforced the rules of chess. We started from scratch. Then provide more details when they ask questions about specific parts of it, or weave it into another one of your answers. To recap, here's what I covered and what the goal of the talk is. Hopefully you took a couple things away. And just like gardening, there are factors beyond your control. So you have to plant a lot of seeds to get the yield that you want. Submit a lot of applications. Be organized about it, and you want to control as many of the variables as possible. Anybody have any questions?
I do. How was it, since you're not working as a Ruby or Rails developer, and I saw that your blog post with the nice halves, and that was nice to have. That was actually a great idea that other people should implement when looking for a job, because they might be surprised at what they find out. But did you run into any issues interviewing or discussing or doing anything like that with your company? Because you're doing the Microsoft stack basically, and
Yep.
did you run into any issues
really
there?
Honestly, I just it's totally, I've been told before, honesty is the best policy. And I mean, they didn't care that I didn't know C#. I mean, it is an object-oriented language anyways. But you still know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you used, something that talks to the back end. You're familiar with MVC, model view controller. And more importantly, they were very interested, especially for the position I applied for. It was I'm an associate, or an entry-level junior developer. So it literally said 0 to 2 years of experience. So I had no problem just flat out telling them this is the experience that I have. I'm totally open to learning a new language. I'm going to keep using Ruby on the side anyways. I just told them that right at the front.
Cool. Did you struggle with learning the new language, or was it, a little hurdle, but
Well, it's week number 2. So
yeah.
So it's it makes for some very interesting blog posts. I did one last week, what the differences between them, and I got a lot more examples. I'm actually using some of the previous Firehose work I did in Ruby and trying to recreate it in C#. So I'm trying to solve the same problems, basically. I did the foobar problem in C#, which actually helped me understand things quite a bit better. So
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Awesome.
It's awesome to hear. I like how it's you're transitioning into a different language, different stack, and how you apply the same principles to it, and it actually works out really nicely, which is what I always preach. It's not that much about the language. You can always switch around and learn new things once you understand how to actually write a good program and solve problems through code. So it's great to hear.
So I have a question. It's not necessarily directly related, but just what does a day at work look like? Like what time do you show up, and just I'm just kind of interested to just hear a little bit about your job.
So I found out, so one of my must-haves was a flexible work schedule. I was totally open to a remote job, or at very least, because I have 2 kids now. One of them is 3 weeks old, and my wife is still in pharmacy school. So I need some flexibility as far as, dropping kid off at daycare or whatnot. Her schedule is going to change kind of every 6 weeks starting in January again. So the core hours are 10 to 2. We usually have a sprint meeting in the morning around 9 a.m. I get there 7:30, 8 o'clock. A lot of people come in early just to have time where everybody leaves them alone and you can just code for a couple hours. They have like there was a developer symposium today where they had like kind of like this, where cool topics, over lunchtime. Usually there's a couple other sprint meetings throughout the day, and then people are working on bugs, or they break it up. They have, I believe it's 6 teams. So different product lines. It's a product-based company, like software as a service company. So if you're on, like, the team that I'm on deals with kind of like HR related stuff. So a heavy part of it is bugs, fixing bugs. Another part is like they're getting ready in their sprint. They committed to, in 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to get this much done. So you're just tackling tasks to make that happen. My job as a new guy is literally just to learn. Like, I'm free to mess with C#. I got all my box up and running. It's a pretty sweet setup. I got 3 monitors on my desk. Standing desk is nice. You're free to do whatever. I brought in coloring books. I sit there and, like, when I'm just maxed out, I just sit there and color for a couple minutes. It's very casual. It's nice.
That's awesome, Dave. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'm kind of surprised there's not a ton of questions.
Because it was a solid talk.
I figured everybody would have so many questions about sort of like the path that you took and all that stuff. But really great talk, Dave. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the magical answer, which I was totally looking for when I was in Firehose in the curriculum. Where it's like, I just somebody needs to tell me how to do, how to just ace the technical interview. It doesn't exist. Like, it's.
I think if you connect with somebody too, like,
yeah,
you connect with your interviewers, the technical interview is less of an issue. And I think when you even then, and you're going in for an entry level or associate or even a junior with 1 to 2 year experience, they know that you're not going to be able to answer the questions 100%. So it's more, whenever I interview, especially for technical jobs, when I did it for sysadmin work and everything like that, I focused entirely on making good connections with my interviewer so that they just want to hire me based on my personality versus my knowledge, and then I can learn into the job. And that's pretty much how I landed my job too. So I don't think I've ever landed a job without, making good connection with the interviewer.
Yeah, within, I would say, 10 minutes of the interview starting, lasted an hour. I could tell that they were pretty relaxed. We had more of a conversation than questions. So that was, it was very easy to do that. And honestly, like, at least from that experience, like, they were very interested. Everything from Firehose translated very well. So they were genuinely interested about everything that I had accomplished so far. So that was cool.
That's pretty awesome.
That's awesome. Well, cool stuff. Let's jump to the next talk. So I think Tyler's here now, and he's giving a talk on TMUX, terminal multiplexer. So Tyler, do you want to jump in?
Dave,
Hey,
you're still
everybody.
sharing the screen. Okay, sorry. Keep going, Tyler.
Hey everybody, my name is Tyler Pendleton, and I'm excited to share TMUX with you. I know we looked at the IDE a minute ago with Diane, and this is the Vim route kind of thing. So give me 1 second to get my PowerPoint up, share my screen. Wait a second. Get this out of here. All right, TMUX, the best thing since I discovered Vim. So TMUX is a terminal multiplexer. And it sounds like really confusing. Don't know what a terminal multiplexer is. But it's really simple. It takes one terminal window and separates it into several different terminal sessions. So you can have a lot more going on in one screen, and it reduces your distractions. So an example would be, the first example of not using this would be the Firehose vagrant. Like when you start up your server, you get the vagrant going, you get all this other stuff going on. You have two separate terminal windows open. You have one window with multiple tabs. You've got a text editor open, and you spend half your day navigating the windows. But when you're using Tmux, you have one full screen terminal window with 3 panes, maybe 3 panes. And I've got my text editor on the left. I'm using Vim. And at the top right of the screen, there's the rake routes, and the bottom right's running the server. So you can navigate between all these without ever lifting your hands away from the keyboard. So getting started with Tmux is really easy for Mac users and Linux users. Windows users, you're screwed. I looked up how to install this for you, and you should just use the Firehose vagrant. Makes it a little easier. But if you know how to use Cygwin and get through that, shouldn't be a problem for you. And starting Tmux is as simple as typing Tmux and hitting enter. So sessions are what Tmux uses to separate your work environments. So say you're ready to work on Flixtor, you can create a session that has that 3-pane organization up and come back to it or leave it at any time and have it saved. So you can have several different sessions at the same time, and they're completely separate working environments, all in the directory that you're using for your project. So starting a new session is as easy as Tmux new session -s, and that S flag allows you to specify the session name. We're going to see another couple of different flags that mean different things for Tmux, and they're all pretty simple. So the S flag allows you to specify the session name, and this would start a new session with the name session name. And to view all of your Tmux sessions, you use the command tmux ls. So it's much like just viewing the files in your current directory on the command line. And to select or attach to one of these sessions, you would use tmux attach. And -t, the -t flag is for selecting a target. So the -s is for naming a session or renaming a session. -t would be to pick a session out of the ones you currently have available. So that would attach you to a session called target session. And I didn't ask, can everybody hear me okay and see what's going on? All right. So to detach from your current session without destroying anything, you can save it. So you've got your work environment up, and you've got another session up. To close out of it without ending your session, you just type in tmux detach, and it closes out all of your windows but saves that session so that you can come back to it at a later point. And to kill your session completely, like you were shutting down your computer, you could use tmux kill session -t to select your target session. So got to be careful when you're doing that. I tend to not do it very often because I like to keep my sessions up and running so I can flip back and forth as often as I need to. And why you would use sessions to keep everything organized. Say you have Flixtor open and you have a session window with 3 panes all working in the Flixtor directory. And you have another one, you're like, okay, I'm working on my blog too. And now that I've learned Flixtor, there's so much that I want to write about. So I'm going to flip over to my blog. It's got a bunch of panes open, working in a completely different directory. And if I was working with a bunch of terminal windows open and Sublime text, I'd have to change the folder that I'm going in. I'd have to close out of the old one that I was using and do all these different things to get switched over. Whereas in Tmux, because you already have your code blog session up, or maybe you don't, you could type tmux detach to get out of the Flixtor one without closing it, and then attach to code blog if you have it, or new session to code blog if you need it. So it makes switching sessions really, really easy, and kind of speeds up your workflow if you're working with a lot of different projects, or you're going from work to home, and say you're working on a bunch of open source stuff. You've got all that kind of room to play around without losing your space in your work environment. So navigating your sessions in Tmux is pretty easy. Everything is started with a prefix key, which by default is Control-B. So when you're looking up commands for this application, most people refer to it as just prefix. So they'll say prefix and then the command. So the default for that is Control-B. And the default pane navigation It does the same things as, Vim would if you're using Vim. You can vertically split the pane with the prefix percentage, horizontally with prefix quotation, and you can switch panes with prefix O or prefix semicolon. And windows are like tabs. So it's a little bit of a different naming convention, but windows are like separate tabs that you would use in a regular terminal or Sublime Text or something like that. So you can create a new window with prefix C and go to the next window with prefix N and the previous with prefix P. So it's all pretty easy once you get the hang of, putting in the prefix key and then go into the next command. Tmux is very customizable, and everything, or all you need to do to get, sorry, that was weird. To customize it, you just have to access the configuration file, and it's in your root directory, the .tmux.conf. And I'm going to post this online for you guys so that you can access, what my current configuration is. This is just some of the things that I found useful. So I changed, my prefix key because that was uncomfortable. It pulled my hands away from the home row to get to the Control B. So I unbound the Control B and set it to Control S. Makes it a little bit easier for my hands to move around it. And then I changed the pane navigation so that it was more like Vim because I was really comfortable with how I moved around in that text editor. So in the configuration, if you want to set a global thing, -G flag is for global. And if you don't want to use the prefix when using a command, the -N flag makes the prefix unnecessary. So Tmux Terminal Multiplexer helps streamline your workflow by giving you access to all of your terminal sessions in one window. And this reduces distractions. So you're not flipping back and forth between a bunch of different windows. And maybe you've got, iMessage open and you're talking to your girlfriend and you're like, oh, wait, no, I got to talk to her for a little bit. Or you have Reddit open and you're just way too distracted. All of this is in one window. You're not flipping back and forth between anything. And you never have to reach over and use the mouse. It's all home row commands, really easy. And it helps that you can save your sessions and get back to them more easily when you're switching between workflows and projects. So that's all I have.
Awesome stuff. So I have a question, and you can tell me that you don't want to answer it, but do you have your dev environment set up? I'd love to see sort of just you use Tmux on your machine just a little bit so people could see the splitting of the panes and that type of thing.
Okay. Give me 1 sec to get that.
Sweet.
So I'll share my screen again. Okay, so this is the basic terminal window. So to get Tmux up, and I already have a session for Flixter because I was working on that earlier. So to get back to that session, I'll go Tmux attach -T Flixter, and it pops open into how I was working on it earlier. So if I wanted to get rid of windows or reorganize, I can hit the Control D and it'll get rid of windows for me. If I needed to, I can close the server first. And now I just have Vim open. And when you're in Vim, it kind of overrides the commands for Tmux. So to quit Vim, you would do the normal Vim quit. But to split a window, you'd use the prefix and the percentage, gets that one. And when you're splitting windows in this, it uses the current pane that you're in, as opposed to the entire window. So if I were to split it horizontally, it would split the pane instead of the entire window, which I find really, really useful as opposed to cutting my whole screen in half, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah, it's super cool. It's super cool to use it with Vim too. I think it really is almost like a full IDE without sort of an IDE. So it's kind of interesting. It's cool that this talk happened at the same time as the RubyMine one, because you get to see the two different sort of ways you can sort of set up your environment. Does anybody else have any other questions?
What was the learning curve like doing all this? I mean, obviously you're learning Vim, but was it pretty easy?
I found some really, really good videos online, and I was using Vim in a day and this in a half hour.
Oh, that's great.
So I think that it may seem intimidating when you go start into it, but say you've already learned Vim, those commands, you can edit the commands for this to mirror that. And it makes, it pretty much gets rid of the learning curve. You get used to splitting the pane like you would in Vim, but instead of them being other text windows or panes, they're terminal panes.
Because this would be very helpful for what I'm doing now. Our app we got one big app, but we've got like a ton of micro apps that connect to it. So I'm constantly working in like 2, 3, 4 different apps. They all have to interact with each other. So managing terminals is a complete pain.
Yeah. So, I mean, I thought this was wonderful. And I thought it was intimidating. Somebody mentioned it to me and I stayed away from it for, a week or so. And then because I'd heard the name, when you hear something, you start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
So I started seeing, I was like, all right, well, I have to give it a shot, even if it's tough. I mean, I learned Vim, so why not? And it turned out to be a piece of cake and incredibly helpful for speeding up my workflow.
Cool.
Super cool. Does anybody else have any other questions? Cool. Good stuff. Yeah, that makes me want to. So I use Vim, but I don't use Tmux, and now I kind of want to because I've been sort of intimidated. So maybe I'll take the plunge and sort of jump right in.
Do it, Ken.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. So that's all the lightning talks for today. So thanks so much for coming, everybody. We have when are the next ones, Colin?
The next ones will be October 15th, so 2 weeks from today. I put the link to the app in the
With
chat.
a 5-second delay. That was pretty good.
I had it queued up. I think we need
It looks like
one more, unless Tyler wanted to. I don't know. We talked about that last night. If you wanted to give another one next week, but right now we need more. November. What the hell was it? November 5th, I believe, would be the next one. So we need a full lineup for November 5th. So if you guys want to do lightning talks, that'd be awesome. Let me know.
Cool. Good stuff. Yeah. If you want to, you can sign up with the app. So just go there and sort of sign up. And yeah, good stuff. Excellent talks. I learned a ton tonight. This was super fun. So thanks everybody who gave a talk. Thanks for everybody for coming. It's really awesome. And yeah, we'll see you probably for the next ones.
Refactoring our CSS code with Emacs tomorrow.
Our CSS code
workflow is going to totally drop tomorrow.
But long term, it's going to win.
Expect outages. No, just kidding.
Good stuff. All right, guys. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Awesome.
Thumbs up, everyone.
See you guys.
Bye.